She scrubbed their floors, cooked their meals, and slept on the cold ground. But one day, a black car stopped outside, and everything changed. She knelt quietly by the side of the broken cement basin, her hands red from scrubbing the dirty laundry of those who never missed a chance to humiliate her. The morning sun had barely risen, but the insults had already begun raining down. "You're so slow! Even the neighbors' maids are better than you!" shouted her aunt, throwing another dirty sheet at her face. Laughter echoed from the veranda where her cousins stood, sipping tea and pointing fingers. One of them, in a fit of mockery, grabbed a bucket of water and threw it on her. "That'll help you wash faster, won't it?" he sneered. She didn't reply. She never did. Silence had become her only protection in a home where love had no space for orphans. Every night, once everyone fell asleep, she'd pull out an old, torn book from under her mattress. With a candle flickering beside her, she'd trace the words with her fingers, learning page by page. Her eyes, though tired and sore, sparkled with hope. The world inside those pages gave her strength, strength no one could see. Weeks passed. Then one day, a black SUV pulled up in front of the house. The air shifted. A tall man in a designer suit stepped out, holding a leather file and looking around with purpose. "Excuse me," he said to the aunt, who was lounging lazily near the gate. "I'm looking for Miss Alia." She laughed. "Alia, you must be mistaken. That's just the orphan girl, probably in the backyard doing what she does best. Nothing." But the man ignored her and walked straight into the house. Moments later, he found the girl folding clothes quietly in the corner. He bowed slightly. "Miss Alia," he said respectfully, "I've been sent on behalf of your grandfather's estate. You are his sole heir. He passed away last week and left everything to you." The room fell into silence. The aunt dropped the cup in her hand, shattering it on the floor. Her sons looked at each other, stunned and speechless. Alia stood still, unable to process the words. "You must be wrong," she finally whispered. "No, ma'am. He had been looking for you for years. You were never forgotten. You're now the legal owner of over 50 acres of land, several properties, and a bank inheritance." From that day on, everything changed. Alia walked through the same house with dignity. The same people who once mocked her now stumbled over their words, trying to earn her favor. Her silence remained, but now it spoke louder than ever before. Where once she was invisible, now she was untouchable. The girl they treated like a slave had turned out to be a queen. She moved silently around the dining table, carefully placing plates in front of her stepmother and step-siblings. Her hands trembled slightly, not from the weight of the food, but from the weight of her pain. She hadn't eaten since yesterday, yet no one seemed to notice or care. "You call this food?" her stepmother snapped, slamming her spoon on the plate. "You worthless girl!" Without warning, her hand flew across the table and struck her cheek. The sharp sound of the slap echoed louder than the silence that followed. The girl, Alina, didn't flinch. She had long stopped crying. She only lowered her eyes and quietly stepped back, clutching the side of her face. Another day, another insult. It had become routine in the house she once hoped would be her family. Later that evening, as she was cleaning the old wooden cupboard in the storeroom, she noticed a loose board at the back. Curious, she pulled it out, and behind it, tucked carefully in an envelope yellowed by time, was a letter. Her heart pounded as she opened it. The handwriting was neat, elegant, and familiar. "My dearest daughter," it began. "If you're reading this, it means they kept the truth from you. I am your real father, not the man who died in that accident, but the one who built a fortune in silence. I had to give you away to keep you safe, but now that the danger has passed, I want you to return to me. Enclosed is the address of my lawyer. He will help you." Alina's hands trembled, her breath caught in her throat. Everything she knew, everything she had suffered, was built on a lie. The next morning, without telling anyone, she left the house with only the letter in her pocket and hope in her eyes. When she arrived at the address written in the letter, the man who opened the office door looked stunned. You're Mr. Kareem's daughter," he whispered. "He spoke about you every day before he passed." He led her inside, showing her documents, photos, and a will. Everything he owned, the businesses, the estates, the accounts, it's all yours now. He spent years searching for you, but your stepfamily kept you hidden. Tears welled in her eyes. She had never felt this seen, this real. Back home, time passed. Her stepfamily, who had built their lives around deception and cruelty, lost everything. The truth had come out, and karma had quietly done its job. Their house was repossessed, and they were left homeless, with nowhere to go. Then, one rainy afternoon, a black car pulled up to their street. Alina stepped out, dressed not in diamonds or silk, but in grace. They rushed toward her, begging for help, crying crocodile tears. But she didn't yell, she didn't punish. She simply said, The morning sun had barely lit the dusty streets when Zara began her daily chores. Her hands scrubbed the floor of her aunt's small house, her back aching and her clothes torn. She wasn't a guest. She wasn't even treated like family. In her aunt's eyes, she was nothing more than a maid, a burden forced upon her after Zara's parents passed away in a tragic accident. "Don't touch that," her aunt barked as Zara reached for a tray. "You're just a maid. You don't belong in this house, remember that." The words stung, but Zara didn't respond. She simply nodded, lowered her eyes, and continued sweeping the floor. Silence had become her armor. One afternoon, while returning from the market, Zara saw the old woman next door collapse by her gate. Without hesitation, she ran to her, helped her up, and stayed with her for hours, preparing food, cleaning the house, and keeping her company. What Zara didn't know was that a woman across the street had been watching the entire scene from her car, a charity official visiting the area to assess potential scholarship recipients for underprivileged youth. The next day, that woman came back, knocked on Zara's door, and introduced herself. "I saw what you did for that elderly woman," she said softly. "You didn't do it for attention or reward. That tells me everything I need to know about your heart. Would you like to study, Zara? Because I can help you." For the first time in years, Zara allowed herself to cry, not from pain, but from hope. Days later, she left. No one in the house bothered to stop her. They assumed she was going nowhere. But she wasn't disappearing, she was rising. Years passed. The small neighborhood carried on with its routine. The aunt aged, the house wore down, life became heavier. Then, one bright morning, a sleek black luxury car pulled up at the front gate. Children playing in the street paused. The door opened slowly and a woman stepped out, tall, poised, and dressed in elegance that radiated confidence and grace. The aunt stepped outside, irritated. "Who is it now?" But her voice caught in her throat. The woman turned. "Zara?" she gasped. But it wasn't a question anymore. It was disbelief. Zara smiled gently. "Yes, I've come back." The aunt stammered. What do you want?" Zara looked around. The place was crumbling, just like the cruelty that once filled it. "I don't want anything," she said. "I just thought you should know. I bought the entire block, this neighborhood. It's mine now." They couldn't speak. The girl they once called a maid had returned as the woman who now owned their world. And as she turned to leave, the neighborhood watched in silence, not just in awe of what she became, but in shame for never seeing who she truly was. Late at night, while the house slept, Zara would creep into the storage room, the only place where she felt safe. There, hidden in a worn-out box beneath a broken suitcase, were photos she had secretly kept since childhood. A woman she had never met, but somehow always felt connected to. Her smile, her eyes, the way she held a baby wrapped in a floral blanket. It was like looking into a mirror of a life she was never allowed to live. They told her she was an orphan. "We took you in," her uncle would always remind her harshly. "You owe us your life." But deep inside, Zara knew something didn't add up. Why would someone take in a baby just to mistreat her like a servant? Why were there no real memories of her parents, only fragments she couldn't explain? One day, while sweeping outside, she overheard the neighbors talking to a visitor, an elderly man with kind eyes. As he passed by, he glanced at Zara, and something in his face changed. He froze. He walked closer. "What's your name, child?" "Zara," she replied cautiously. His hands trembled. He reached into his coat and pulled out an old photograph. In it, a baby girl with a bracelet that said Z. He looked up, stunned. "You're her. You're the baby they said was kidnapped 15 years ago." Zara's heart pounded. Kidnapped. The man turned out to be a family friend, someone who had searched for her alongside her real parents for years. He had only come to this village on business, but fate had other plans. Within hours, he made calls, photos were exchanged, DNA was arranged, and days later, Zara stood face to face with her real mother, the woman from the photo she'd clutched for years. Tears poured down her face as her mother embraced her tightly, sobbing uncontrollably. "My baby, I never stopped looking for you." The truth came crashing down like a storm. She had been stolen by a distant relative after her father passed away, hidden away in a quiet town, raised not with love but with control, so they could claim the inheritance she never knew she had. The police arrived shortly after. Her so-called uncle and aunt were arrested for kidnapping, fraud, and years of abuse. Zara didn't watch as they were dragged away. She was too busy holding her mother's hand, her face buried in her shoulder, finally feeling warmth she had long forgotten. That night, she packed her few belongings, but before she left, she walked through the house one last time, not as the broken girl they had tried to erase, but as the daughter who had finally been found. She was the child they hid, but the truth had finally set her free. A dusty wind swept through the village as a black car rolled to a stop. A tall, well-dressed man stepped out, eyes scanning every corner. He quietly observed how a young girl, frail, silent, and bruised, was scolded, insulted, and ordered around like a servant. No one knew who he was until he calmly spoke, "I'm her uncle, her real guardian, and I've come to take her home." Gasps filled the air. Papers were shown, truth exposed. The girl's eyes welled with tears, not from pain, but from sudden hope. She was escorted with honor into the car that brought her freedom. Years later, she returned, not as a victim, but as the legal owner of the very house where she once suffered. Now, silence ruled the place that once echoed with cruelty. The girl they once broke now owned everything they built on lies.